The wind howled relentlessly across the frozen plains, carrying with it the bitter sting of an endless winter. Ice stretched as far as the eye could see, glinting under a pale, weak sun that seemed to hover impotently above the horizon. The world was silent, except for the occasional crack of shifting glaciers and the distant roar of some unseen predator moving through the snow. For the humans who had chosen, or perhaps had no choice but, to inhabit this frozen land, every step outside their shelters was a battle against nature itself. Darkness fell early, blanketing the landscape in hours of freezing night that tested both body and mind. Survival was not guaranteed. It was something that had to be fought for, earned, and preserved with every action, every decision, every flicker of ingenuity. The cavemen of this era were no strangers to fear. They understood the dangers lurking beyond the safety of their caves and temporary shelters. Predators roamed the tundra in search of prey, tracking the faintest traces of life. Wolves, giant cats with saber-like teeth, and massive bears prowled silently, waiting for a moment of weakness. The cold itself was a predator, creeping under furs and through poorly insulated dwellings, claiming those who could not generate enough warmth or find protection. Frostbite could take fingers, toes, or worse, and starvation was a constant companion when the hunt failed, or food became buried beneath layers of ice and snow. Every day was a delicate balance between daring to leave the relative safety of a fire-lit cave and succumbing to the terrifying grip of the frozen wilderness. Yet, amidst this stark and unforgiving environment, there was life. Human families huddled together for warmth, sharing what little resources they could find or capture. The glow of fire flickered against stone walls, casting dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. Conversations, though simple, carried meaning, warnings, instructions, and stories that passed knowledge from one generation to the next. These were not just words, they were lifelines. Knowledge of which plants could be eaten, which animals could be hunted safely, how to start fire in the midst of a snowstorm, and where to seek shelter in the open plains. This information separated life from death. In the Ice Age, knowledge was survival, and the ability to act on it was nothing short of heroic. The landscape itself told a story of extremes. Frozen rivers glimmered under thin layers of ice, occasionally cracking to reveal dark, rushing waters beneath. Snow-laden forests creaked under the weight of frost, their branches bending like the spines of the very land itself, pressed down by the relentless cold. Valleys and caves became sanctuaries, offering some reprieve from the open expanse. Yet even these were not free from danger. Avalanches could bury life in an instant, and hidden predators often used the cover of snow to stalk unsuspecting travelers. In such a world, even the simplest tasks, gathering wood, searching for food, or exploring for a better shelter, require courage, planning, and sometimes a touch of luck. It is easy for modern eyes to underestimate the resilience of these early humans, imagining them as fragile or ill-equipped. Yet, in reality, every small triumph in the face of such adversity was monumental. Successfully igniting a fire from flint and dry moss could mean the difference between life and death. Tracking a herd of reindeer or identifying edible roots beneath frozen soil was an achievement of observation and patience honed over generations. The struggle against the cold was constant, and the rewards, though simple, were profoundly satisfying. A warm meal, a shelter that kept the biting wind at bay, and the company of family and tribe members who shared the same fate. This introduction to the frozen wilderness is not merely about environmental challenges. It is about contrast. The stark brutality of winter nights amplifies the value of warmth, light, and community. Life in these harsh conditions was a continuous negotiation between fear and hope, vulnerability and resourcefulness. The Ice Age did not forgive mistakes, but rewarded ingenuity and cooperation. By observing these early humans, we gain not only an understanding of their struggle, but also a glimpse into the origins of human resilience itself. In a world ruled by cold and darkness, fire, shelter, and companionship became sacred, treasured tools of survival, and symbols of triumph over the relentless forces of nature. Every footstep across the snow-laden earth carried the weight of necessity. Every plan, every improvised tool, and every moment of shared warmth was a testament to the human spirit. The silence of the frozen plains was deceptive. Beneath it lay a symphony of life, struggle, and perseverance. These cavemen, navigating the coldest nights imaginable, were not merely surviving. They were learning, adapting, and setting the foundations for the future of humanity. Their story, framed by the stark contrast of fear and safety, death and survival, darkness and firelight, begins here in the frozen silence of the Ice Age. Humans of the Ice Age were not a single, uniform species. They were a diverse tapestry of early humans, each uniquely adapted to the harsh, frigid world they inhabited. Neanderthals, with their robust frames and thick bones, were perfectly suited to endure cold winters, their short limbs minimizing heat loss, their muscular bodies capable of surviving on a diet rich in protein and fat. Denisovans, less is known about them. Yet the fragments of DNA and fossils tell a story of adaptation, resilience, and survival across the vast expanses of Eurasia. And then there were the early Homo sapiens, whose intelligence and adaptability allowed them to venture into the most extreme environments, sometimes outcompeting their cousins through innovation and cooperation. This section explores not just who these people were, but how their bodies, minds, and communities were shaped by the cold, frozen world around them. Physical adaptations were the first line of defense against the winter's cruelty. Thick layers of fat, fur-covered clothing, and dense muscle mass were biological advantages, but culture amplified these traits. Clothing made from animal hides was sewn together with bone needles and sinew, and layered in a way that trapped heat close to the body. Feet were wrapped carefully, hand protected from frostbite with leather coverings, and heads insulated with fur caps. The cavemen had learned, through centuries of trial and error, that survival depended on understanding the delicate balance between exertion and conservation of energy. Overexertion in freezing temperatures could lead to deadly hypothermia, while inactivity risked the same fate through prolonged exposure. Their bodies and minds were finely tuned instruments, calibrated to respond to the rhythms of the seasons, the behavior of animals, and the dangers hidden in the snow and ice. Social structures were equally critical. Life in the Ice Age was not solitary. Humans relied on small bands, often no more than 20 individuals, living and working together. The division of labor was practical. Some hunted, some gathered, some cared for the young or elderly, while others maintained fire and shelters. Knowledge was shared orally, through simple instructions and stories that carried essential survival strategies. These stories, repeated night after night beside the fire, were not merely entertainment. They were education, memory, and ritual all at once. A child learning which roots were edible or how to track a deer in the snow was gaining the skills that could mean life or death come winter's worst nights. Here, we see the delicate interplay of biology, intelligence, and culture. Survival was a group effort, strengthened by cooperation, trust, and the relentless passing down of knowledge. The psychological aspect of Ice Age life cannot be overlooked. Humans had to endure months of long nights, bitter cold, and a sense of isolation that could be mentally crushing. Depression, anxiety, and fear were as real then as they are now. Yet early humans developed ways to cope. Rituals, whether spiritual or practical, provided structure. The lighting of the fire was a moment of control over the environment, a brief victory over the darkness and cold. Singing, chanting, or storytelling around that fire created social cohesion and alleviated the weight of fear. Every human in the band, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, participated in this dance of survival, reinforcing both the bonds of kinship and the mental resilience required to endure the Ice Age winters. Dietary adaptations also tell a story of intelligence and ingenuity. Neanderthals, for instance, were skilled hunters, targeting large game like mammoths and bison, often using coordinated strategies to trap and ambush prey. Early Homo sapiens were versatile, hunting smaller animals, fishing in frozen streams, and gathering nuts, roots, and tubers hidden beneath the snow. Food was more than sustenance. It was a psychological comfort, a source of energy, and a currency for social exchange. Sharing a successful kill strengthened bonds, while scarcity tested patience, ingenuity, and cooperation. In many ways, the challenge of acquiring food shaped not only the physical evolution of these humans, but also their social structures, communication skills, and cultural practices. Living alongside predators and other dangers required keen observation and strategic thinking. Humans had to understand the behavior of wolves, saber-toothed cats, and bears, tracking them while avoiding becoming prey themselves. Cave dwellings and temporary shelters were often chosen for their defensive advantages, not just warmth. This constant vigilance nurtured intelligence, foresight, and problem-solving abilities. Every action, whether leaving the cave to gather firewood, venturing onto icy plains to hunt, or teaching a child to recognize animal tracks, was a calculated risk. In this frozen environment, intelligence and adaptability were as vital as strength and endurance. The story of Ice Age humans is also a story of contrast, the fragility of life alongside the remarkable ingenuity that ensured survival. Their days were punctuated by danger, hunger, and cold, yet also by innovation, camaraderie, and fleeting moments of comfort. The stark brutality of the environment amplified the value of fire, shelter, and social cohesion. These early humans were not merely surviving. They were learning to master a world that was indifferent to their existence, shaping themselves, their communities, and ultimately, their destiny in the process. Understanding who these people were helps us appreciate not only their resilience, but also the evolutionary forces that shaped modern humans. Each adaptation, each tool created, each ritual practiced, and each story told around a fire was a small victory in the ongoing struggle against extinction. In studying them, we glimpse the origins of traits that define humanity: intelligence, cooperation, creativity, and a relentless drive to endure in the face of adversity. The Ice Age was not simply a period of environmental challenge. It was a crucible that tested, refined, and ultimately strengthened the human species. Through examining bones, DNA, tools, and cave art, we reconstruct a vivid portrait of these Ice Age people, a family huddled against the wind, eyes bright with determination, hunters moving silently across snowy plains, elders teaching children the knowledge that could keep them alive. They lived at the edge of possibility, balancing fear with ingenuity, survival with innovation, darkness with the light of their fires. This is who the Ice Age humans were, a testament to adaptability, courage, and the indomitable human spirit, ready to face the coldest nights imaginable. In the unforgiving expanse of the Ice Age, survival often hinged on one simple, yet relentless reality: food. The bitter cold made the search for sustenance a matter of life and death. Cavemen could not rely on the familiar abundance of plants and animals seen in temperate regions. Here, the world was frozen, and resources were scarce, hidden beneath layers of snow and ice or migrating across distant plains. Every day, families and tribes faced the daunting task of tracking prey, gathering what little plant life remained, and storing enough to endure the endless winter nights. Hunger was an omnipresent force, a shadow lurking behind every frozen ridge and icy valley, pushing humans to innovate, cooperate, and adapt in ways that would ultimately shape their evolution. The hunt for large game was the cornerstone of survival. Mammoths, reindeer, and bison provided not only meat but also hides, bones, and sinew, materials essential for clothing, tools, and shelter. Hunting these massive animals required more than brute strength. It demanded strategy, coordination, and patience. Groups would track herds for days, observing migration patterns, understanding feeding habits, and identifying weaknesses in the herd's defenses. The hunt was dangerous. A misstep could lead to injury or death, either from the prey itself or from the exposure to freezing winds and snowstorms while pursuing it. Yet the rewards were monumental. A successful hunt could feed a tribe for weeks, providing warmth, nourishment, and materials necessary to survive in an otherwise hostile world. Smaller prey played an equally critical role. Rabbits, birds, and fish were often easy to capture and could supplement the diet when larger game proved elusive. These animals required different hunting methods. Traps, snares, and fishing techniques adapted to frozen rivers and icy lakes. Cavemen demonstrated remarkable ingenuity in crafting tools from bone, wood, and stone, designing them specifically to catch these smaller creatures efficiently. In a landscape where every calorie mattered, these small victories were often as crucial as the large hunts. The contrast between the struggle to capture elusive prey and the abundance it provided emphasized the delicate balance of survival, illustrating the intimate relationship between humans and their environment. Plant life, though limited, was also vital. Roots, tubers, berries, and edible shoots could be found beneath the snow or in sheltered microclimates. Gathering plants required intimate knowledge of the land, which species were safe to eat, which could be stored for winter, and which could even provide medicinal benefits. Knowledge of plants was passed orally from elder to youth, encoded in songs, stories, and rituals that ensured the survival of knowledge as much as of the body. The ability to find edible resources in a barren, frozen landscape highlighted the combination of observation, memory, and ingenuity that defined early human survival strategies. Every plant gathered was a victory over scarcity, a reminder that even the smallest resource could mean the difference between life and death. Storage and preservation of food became a matter of ingenuity. Cavemen learned to hang meat in cold air to slow decomposition, bury roots in insulated snow pits, or even smoke fish and smaller animals near the fire. These practices were not arbitrary. They were refined over generations of trial and error, each method a response to the unforgiving rhythm of Ice Age winters. The contrast between the temporary abundance of a successful hunt and the harsh scarcity of the frozen plains demanded that humans think ahead, plan meticulously, and act collectively. Food was never merely sustenance. It was strategy, psychology, and survival wrapped in flesh, fiber, and frost. Scarcity also shaped social dynamics. Sharing food was not only a moral act, but a practical one. Tribes that shared resources intelligently were more likely to survive, while selfishness could jeopardize a group's collective survival. Hunting success was often communal, with meat distributed according to skill, need, and social role. Children, the elderly, and those recovering from injury were prioritized, ensuring the survival of both experience and future potential. These practices reinforced bonds, created trust, and structured the hierarchy and interdependence of the tribe. Hunger, therefore, was more than a physical condition. It was a social force, shaping human behavior, cooperation, and community cohesion in profound ways. The psychological impact of winter hunger was intense. Days stretched endlessly under pale, weak sunlight, and nights brought piercing cold that gnawed at the body as sharply as the pangs of hunger gnawed at the stomach. Fear of scarcity influenced decision-making, pushing humans to explore new territories, experiment with tools, and innovate in hunting and gathering. Anxiety and anticipation existed alongside triumph and relief, creating a complex emotional landscape in which survival depended as much on mental fortitude as on physical ability. The contrast between the terror of empty stomachs and the joy of a successful hunt underscored the emotional highs and lows that defined life in the frozen wilderness. Seasonal rhythms dictated strategy. During the harshest months, when snow covered the plains and rivers froze solid, cavemen relied heavily on stored food and foraging within sheltered areas. Spring and autumn, however, offered opportunities to hunt migrating herds, gather fresh plant resources, and replenish caches. Timing, therefore, became as critical as technique. Observing animal behaviors, understanding environmental cues, and anticipating weather patterns were all part of a sophisticated survival toolkit. These rhythms of scarcity and abundance shaped migration patterns, hunting strategies, and even social rituals, embedding survival knowledge deeply into the culture and consciousness of Ice Age humans. Food scarcity also influenced innovation. Tools became more specialized: spears designed for throwing, nets for trapping, hooks for fishing, and knives for butchering. Techniques evolved to maximize efficiency and reduce waste. Every skill learned, every method perfected, contributed to a delicate balance of energy expenditure versus nutritional gain, a calculation that could determine survival during the harshest nights. In this sense, hunger was both a challenge and a driver of human ingenuity, pushing early humans to refine their environment and themselves simultaneously. Ultimately, the winter hunger of the Ice Age was a crucible in which human intelligence, social cooperation, and adaptability were tested and strengthened. It created contrasts that defined life itself: scarcity versus abundance, danger versus security, despair versus triumph. Through hunting, gathering, storing, and sharing food, humans navigated a world of constant threat, learning to master their environment in small but significant ways. Each meal earned was a victory, each survival a testament to resilience, foresight, and determination. The story of Ice Age hunger is not one of mere suffering. It is a story of strategy, community, and adaptation. It reminds us that even in the coldest, harshest conditions, life can endure through intelligence, ingenuity, and social cohesion. Cavemen did not simply react to scarcity. They planned for it, learned from it, and turned it into an opportunity for growth and survival. Every frozen night, every hidden route, every successful hunt tells the story of a species that would not merely survive but thrive, laying the foundations for the complex societies that would eventually emerge millennia later. The frozen plains of the Ice Age were not empty. They were alive with the movement of predators, each perfectly adapted to the harsh conditions, each a constant threat to human survival. Wolves roamed in silent packs, their keen eyes and sharp instincts making them formidable hunters of both game and the occasional human who strayed too far from safety. Saber-toothed cats, with their elongated canine teeth and powerful limbs, lurked in shadowed forests and snow-covered valleys, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And massive cave bears, largely solitary but incredibly strong, dominated certain territories, their sheer size and intimidating presence to anyone crossing their path. Every excursion outside a cave or shelter carried the tension of potential encounter, the knowledge that one misstep could be fatal. Humans learned quickly that survival depended on understanding the behavior of these predators. Tracking was both science and art, recognizing paw prints in the snow, identifying scat and scratch marks, observing hunting patterns. Early humans developed strategies to avoid confrontation when possible, using stealth, camouflage, and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Movement through the landscape was deliberate. The paths taken were as important as the destination. Crossing an open plain without cover could invite attack, while understanding the predator's likely route could turn danger into an opportunity for avoidance. In this way, the Ice Age humans were not passive victims. They were careful, observant, and strategic participants in a deadly dance with nature. Yet, avoidance was not always an option. There were times when confrontation was unavoidable, when humans had to defend themselves against an approaching predator. Fire became a critical tool, its warmth and light creating a protective circle of safety. Spears and crude weapons sharpened stones, and traps allowed humans to strike from a distance or protect vulnerable family members. These confrontations were dangerous, often terrifying, and could result in serious injury or death. The contrast between the primal fear inspired by predators and the cautious confidence granted by preparedness defined the psychology of Ice Age humans. They lived in a world where danger was ever present, yet knowledge, planning, and skill offered a fighting chance. Predators also influenced social behavior. Humans who hunted together or traveled in groups increased their chances of survival. Cooperation became a necessity rather than an option. While a lone hunter might be easily ambushed, a coordinated group could fend off wolves or divert the attention of a saber-toothed cat. Social bonds were strengthened through shared danger, and leadership often emerged in the context of protection and decision-making. The predator threat was not merely physical. It shaped the very structure of early human communities, their strategies, and the rules of engagement that governed everyday life. Observation of predators also became a learning tool. By studying how wolves coordinated their hunts or how big cats ambushed their prey, humans gleaned insights into stealth, timing, and efficiency. These lessons were applied not only to avoid becoming prey, but also to improve their own hunting techniques. The Ice Age was a classroom, and predators were both teachers and challengers, demanding respect, ingenuity, and constant vigilance. The contrast between predator threat and human learning highlights the adaptive intelligence that will become a hallmark of our species. The psychological tension created by predators cannot be overstated. Every shadow could conceal danger. Every rustle of wind across snow-laden trees could signal an approaching threat. Fear was a constant companion, sharpening senses and motivating caution, but it also demanded control. Panic could lead to mistakes, injuries, or fatal miscalculations. Humans had to balance vigilance with rational action, fear with preparation, and instinct with intelligence. It was a mental challenge as demanding as the physical trials imposed by the cold and scarcity. Nighttime was particularly perilous. Darkness amplified vulnerability, masking the movement of predators and limiting visibility to the immediate glow of firelight. Cave entrances and shelters offered refuge, but they were not impregnable. The sound of prowling wolves or the distant roar of a bear could strike terror even within seemingly secure walls. Fires were tended meticulously, positioned strategically to ward off danger, and supplemented with noise, torches, and communal vigilance. The contrast between the warmth and security of the fire and the threat of the shadowed landscape created a dramatic tension that defined daily life during the Ice Age. Predators were also unpredictable, shaping migration and movement. Herds of prey often moved to avoid predator pressure, and humans followed, adapting their hunting and travel accordingly. Avoiding a dangerous territory might mean longer journeys, greater energy expenditure, and exposure to the elements, but the alternative could be immediate death. In this way, the presence of predators intertwined with every aspect of Ice Age life. Hunting strategies, social cohesion, territorial awareness, and even cultural rituals designed to honor or placate the forces of nature that threatened human survival. The relationship between humans and predators was complex. While predators were enemies, they also indirectly taught survival skills, inspired tools and weapons, and influenced strategies for cooperation and leadership. The Ice Age humans learned to navigate this delicate balance between fear and opportunity, threat and preparation. The constant contrast between vulnerability and empowerment, danger and skill, terror and triumph, was a defining feature of existence in the frozen wilderness. Ultimately, understanding predators is not just about fear, it is about adaptation. These threats forced early humans to think, plan, and act with precision. They catalyzed innovation, fostered social cohesion, and sharpened both physical and mental abilities. Life in the Ice Age was a series of encounters with danger, and survival depended on the capacity to respond effectively. The story of predators in the snow is, therefore, also the story of human ingenuity, resilience, and enduring will survive against relentless odds. In this frozen theater of life and death, cavemen learned to respect, anticipate, and sometimes even outwit the creatures that shared their world. Wolves, saber-toothed cats, and bears were not merely obstacles. They were partners in a brutal education, shaping humans into the adaptable, intelligent, and socially cohesive beings that would continue to thrive long after the Ice Age receded. The danger was omnipresent, but so was human creativity, courage, and determination, a testament to the extraordinary resilience of life in the coldest corners of the earth. Fire was not just warmth in the Ice Age, it was life itself. In a world dominated by freezing winds, endless snow, and nights that stretched into seemingly eternal darkness, fire represented safety, sustenance, and community. The ability to create, control, and maintain fire was perhaps the single most critical skill for survival. It provided warmth to stave off hypothermia, light to navigate the long nights, and a method to cook food, making meat safer to eat and easier to digest. In a landscape where one misstep could be fatal, fire was a lifeline, a fragile yet powerful barrier between life and the icy grip of the environment. Early humans did not possess matches or modern lighters. Fire had to be coaxed from the raw elements of their surroundings, flint and pyrite, dry moss, bone friction, and later, control hearts within their shelters. These methods required skill, patience, and understanding of the materials and conditions needed to ignite a spark. One failed attempt could mean hours of exposure to freezing temperatures or the loss of precious daylight, needed to prepare for nightfall. Generations of trial and error had honed the techniques of fire-making, turning it into both a science and an art. Knowledge of where and when to gather materials, how to strike sparks, and how to nurture embers into a lasting flame was passed from elder to youth, becoming as sacred as the fire itself. The fire's glow extended beyond physical warmth. It offered a sense of security, creating a protective circle against predators lurking in the dark. Wolves, saber-toothed cats, and bears avoided flames, giving humans a defensive advantage that was crucial during hunting expeditions or when settling in new territories. The positioning of the fire inside caves or shelters was strategic, designed to maximize heat while minimizing exposure to sparks and potential forest fires. Watching flames dance and flicker, early humans could rest, eat, and plan while maintaining constant vigilance, knowing that the fire's glow delineated safety from the deadly wilderness outside. Fire also transformed food, a crucial adaptation for surviving winters. Raw meat was difficult to chew, digest, and carry for long distances. Cooking over flames softened muscle fibers, killed harmful bacteria, and unlocked calories that would otherwise remain inaccessible. Even small innovations, roasting fish on sticks, smoking meat to preserve it, or slow-cooking tubers buried in embers, had enormous survival benefits. These techniques extended the range of edible resources and allowed early humans to endure longer periods of scarcity. The contrast between raw, cold food and warm, nourishing meals illustrates the profound impact fire had on health, energy, and morale. Beyond survival, fire fostered social cohesion and culture. Nighttime around the flames became a space for storytelling, teaching, and ritual. Elders shared knowledge of hunting routes, dangerous predators, medicinal plants, and weather patterns, often embedded in stories or chants that were easier to remember than simple instructions. Children learned by observation and participation, internalizing lessons that would guide them for the rest of their lives. The fire became the center of the tribe's emotional and cultural life, transforming it from a mere survival tool into a symbol of connection, hope, and identity. The psychology of fire cannot be underestimated. In the pitch-black, frigid world of the Ice Age, fear was constant. The howl of distant wolves, the rumble of shifting glaciers, and the isolation of snowbound landscape could paralyze the unprepared mind. Fire provided reassurance, a visible and tangible line between the known and unknown, the safe and the dangerous. Its warmth allowed humans to rest, to bond, and to dream, even when the world outside was merciless. The flickering glow of flames instilled a sense of control over an environment that otherwise offered little mercy, a delicate but essential psychological buffer against the constant threat of death. Fire also enabled humans to extend their active hours. Days were short in winter, with a weak sun barely rising above the horizon. Without fire, activity was limited to daylight hours, restricting hunting, gathering, and travel. With fire, humans could continue tasks into the darkness, cooking, repairing tools, or reinforcing shelters. Fire became a versatile instrument, expanding the boundaries of what was possible and allowing for more strategic planning. The contrast between the limitations of daylight and the freedom granted by fire illustrates its transformative effect on survival. Maintaining fire required continuous vigilance. Embers could die overnight, leaving the tribe vulnerable by morning. Wind, snow, or sudden storms could extinguish flames, demanding rapid response. Groups often rotated fire-tending duties, a task requiring both responsibility and knowledge. This constant attention reinforced communal bonds, with each member contributing to the collective safety and well-being of the group. In this sense, fire was not just a tool, it was a shared responsibility, a symbol of interdependence, and a practical anchor for community survival. Fire also influenced settlement choices. Cavemen often selected caves or sheltered areas that allowed for safe hearth construction while maximizing the protective benefits of smoke and warmth. Some may have even learned to create semi-permanent hearths, returning seasonally to known locations with reliable fuel sources. These strategic choices highlight the intricate relationship between humans and fire, demonstrating that survival was not merely reactive, but involved foresight, planning, and environmental mastery. Even rituals and spiritual practices were intertwined with fire. Some evidence suggests that fire was central to ceremonies intended to honor ancestors, seek protection from spirits, or ensure hunting success. The fire became a symbol of life, power, and continuity, a sacred element that bridged the natural and spiritual worlds. In a frozen and often hostile environment, these rituals provided psychological resilience, community cohesion, and a framework for understanding and influencing the world. The story of fire in the Ice Age is, therefore, a story of transformation. It was more than a tool. It was a lifeline, a teacher, a protector, and a unifying force. The contrast between the deadly cold and darkness outside the fire's circle and the warmth, light, and security within it defines much of the human experience during this period. Fire enabled survival, but also enabled culture, knowledge transfer, and psychological stability. It was a catalyst for evolution, teaching early humans a value of preparation, cooperation, and ingenuity. Through fire, humans carved a small circle of control in an uncontrollable world. It became a daily ritual, a symbol of hope and resilience, and a tangible testament to the ability of intelligence and cooperation to overcome nature's most formidable challenges. The Ice Age was a crucible, but within a glow of fire, humans discovered the power to endure, adapt, and flourish, a flame that illuminated not just a cave, but the path of humanity itself. In the harsh, frozen landscapes of the Ice Age, humans were forced to become master craftsmen, inventors, and architects of survival. Tools and shelters were not mere conveniences. They were essential to life itself. Every stone carefully chipped into a spear point, every branch woven into a framework for a shelter, and every hide stretched for protection reflected the ingenuity and adaptability of early humans. In a world where the cold could claim life in minutes and predators lurk behind every snowdrift. These creations with a thin line separating life from death. Understanding the methods and significance of tools and shelters offers a window into the minds of those who thrive despite nature's relentless challenges. Stone tools were the foundation of survival. Sharp flint knives allowed humans to butcher meat efficiently, while axes and scrapers helped process hides for clothing and insulation. Spears and arrowheads extended their ability to hunt large game at a distance, reducing personal risk in dangerous encounters. The craftsmanship required not only dexterity but also an understanding of materials, angles, and durability. Selecting the right stone, shaping it with precision, and maintaining tools for repeated use were critical skills. Each successful tool represented a combination of knowledge, practice, and foresight, a tangible extension of human ingenuity in the service of survival. Wooden tools complemented stone implements, often forming the handles of spears, digging sticks, or framework for shelters. Early humans learned to select resilient woods, sometimes even treating them with smoke or fire to prevent decay. Bone, sinew, and antler were also integral, used to create needles, fishhooks, and binding materials. The combination of natural resources into functional tools demonstrates a deep understanding of the environment. Every tool was multifunctional, designed not only for immediate tasks but also for long-term survival, capable of withstanding the stresses imposed by extreme cold and heavy use. Shelters, meanwhile, were equally vital. Caves offered natural protection from the elements and predators, but they were not always available, and their interiors often needed modification for warmth and safety. Humans learned to insulate floors with layers of grass, moss, and animal hides, creating warmth and reducing dampness. Lean-tos, igloo-like structures, and windbreaks made from branches and hides allowed people to establish temporary camps in open areas. The design of these shelters reflected an intimate knowledge of local conditions, wind direction, snow accumulation, predator movement, and sunlight exposure. Each construction was a balance between practicality, safety, and resource availability. The selection of shelter locations was strategic. Near rivers or lakes, humans could access water and attract game, but these areas could also freeze or flood, demanding careful planning. Elevated spots reduced the risk of predator encounters and provided vantage points to spot prey or incoming danger. Shelters near caves or rocky outcrops offered natural windbreaks, while temporary huts allowed flexibility in following migratory herds. Every decision was informed by survival logic, and the contrast between safety and exposure, permanence and mobility, revealed the sophisticated planning that characterized Ice Age living. Fire often intertwined with shelter, enhancing its protective value. Hearths built in the center of caves or within temporary huts radiated warmth throughout the space. Smoke was vented strategically to avoid suffocation, but also to deter predators from approaching too closely. The combination of fire and shelter transformed an otherwise hostile environment into a livable space, demonstrating the interplay between innovation, observation, and practical problem-solving. Early humans learned not just to react to their surroundings, but to modify them, asserting control over an unpredictable world. Shelters were also social spaces, shaping human interaction and community structure. Within their walls, families huddled together, sharing warmth, food, and knowledge. Tasks were coordinated and divided. Some tended fires, others repaired tools or clothing, and children observed and assisted where possible. The architecture of a shelter directly influenced daily routines, social bonds, and even hierarchy, as positioning near the fire or within the safest part of a cave might reflect status or experience. In this way, shelters were not merely physical spaces. They were social and psychological anchors in a chaotic environment. The durability and portability of tools and shelters were critical considerations. Harsh weather could destroy fragile constructions overnight, while the scarcity of materials demanded efficiency and ingenuity. Lightweight, multifunctional tools allowed humans to move quickly and respond to changes in prey or weather. Portable shelters enabled temporary camps that could follow migrating herds or avoid predators. This adaptability exemplified the constant negotiation between permanence and flexibility, risk and security, survival and innovation that defined life in the Ice Age. The crafting of tools and shelters also had cultural and educational significance. Skills were passed orally, through demonstration and by apprenticeship within family or tribal groups. A child learning to chip flint or construct a lean-to was absorbing not just a technical skill, but a survival philosophy, observation, patience, and respect for the environment. Mistakes were costly, yet they became lessons embedded in tribal knowledge, refined over generations. The contrast between novice attempts and mastered techniques highlight the incremental learning and cumulative wisdom that underpinned human advancement. Furthermore, tools and shelters reflected human adaptation to seasonal changes. In winter, insulation, fire placement, and tool readiness were paramount. During milder months, emphasis shifted toward mobility, hunting efficiency, and storage for the upcoming cold. Observing the rhythms of the environment and modifying both tools and shelters accordingly became a sophisticated survival strategy. The relationship between humans and their constructed environment demonstrates an early form of ecological intelligence, understanding how to manipulate and coexist with nature to maximize survival. Even in the face of Ice Age dangers, predators, cold, hunger, the combination of tools and shelters provided a measure of empowerment. They allowed humans to expand their range, experiment with new hunting strategies, and endure longer periods of scarcity. These innovations were tangible expressions of intelligence, foresight, and creativity, transforming the environment from an uncontrollable threat into a landscape that could be navigated, modified, and, to some extent, mastered. The story of tools and shelters is, therefore, a story of human ingenuity. It illustrates the ability to observe, understand, and manipulate the environment to meet essential needs. Each tool and each shelter is a testament to problem-solving, adaptation, and foresight, skills that not only ensured survival during the Ice Age, but also laid the foundations for the development of complex societies. The contrast between the harsh, frozen world outside and the warmth, protection, and functionality within human-made spaces encapsulates the essence of early human resilience. Ultimately, the mastery of tools and shelters was more than practical necessity. It was an assertion of human presence and creativity in a world defined by extremes. The Ice Age demanded constant innovation, and through their ingenuity, humans carved spaces of safety and efficiency, transforming the deadly wilderness into a habitat where survival, learning, and community could flourish. In the frozen expanse of the Ice Age, clothing was far more than decoration. It was survival. The bitter winds, piercing cold, and snow-laden landscapes made the human body vulnerable to frostbite, hypothermia, and death. Early humans quickly learned that to endure the harsh winters, they needed protection that combined warmth, mobility, and durability. Every layer, every stitch, and every piece of hide or fur reflected centuries of observation, experimentation, and adaptation. Clothing was not simply fabric. It was armor against the relentless forces of nature. Animal hides and furs were the primary materials, harvested from the very creatures hunted for food. Mammoth hides provided thick insulation, while smaller animals like deer, rabbit, and fox offered flexible, wearable layers. Hides were tanned, stretched, and sometimes sewn together using bone needles and sinew, forming garments that trapped heat and shielded the body from wind and snow. Layers were essential. Inner linings of softer fur provided comfort and insulation, while outer layers of thicker hide protected against moisture and abrasion. Even gloves and foot coverings were carefully crafted to prevent frostbite, showing a sophisticated understanding of both anatomy and environment. Sewing techniques were ingenious. Bone needles, sharpened and hollowed, allowed for precise stitching with animal sinew acting as thread. Early humans developed methods to overlap hides, reinforce seams, and create garments that were flexible yet strong. These techniques were labor-intensive but vital. A single poorly crafted garment could result in severe cold injury or death, while well-made clothing enabled survival in some of the harshest climates ever inhabited by humans. The care and skill invested in these garments reveal not only practical necessity, but also an emerging sense of craftsmanship and aesthetic sensibility. Clothing also reflected social and cultural patterns. Certain furs or decorative elements may have signaled status, skill, or role within the group. Children were dressed carefully, ensuring they remained warm while learning essential survival skills. Elders were prioritized, their experience deemed invaluable for the tribe's ongoing survival. Clothing, therefore, was intertwined with social structure, protection, and even identity. The contrast between simple functional wear and potentially symbolic adornments highlights the dual role of garments as both practical survival tools and expressions of culture. Adaptation to seasonal changes was critical. Winter clothing needed to provide maximum insulation, while garments for milder months emphasized mobility and ventilation. Humans learned to adjust layers, remove or add furs, and use natural materials like grasses or moss as supplemental insulation. This dynamic approach to clothing demonstrates an advanced understanding of thermal regulation and environmental response. Clothing was not static. It was a living, evolving tool shaped by observation, experimentation, and necessity. Footwear was particularly crucial. Frozen ground, sharp ice, and deep snow posed serious hazards to unprotected feet. Early humans created moccasin-like shoes, often stuffed with grasses or soft fur, to insulate and cushion the foot. Wrappings of leather or sinew secured the footwear, preventing snow from entering while allowing flexibility for walking and running. The ability to traverse icy plains safely expanded hunting range, improved resource acquisition, and reduced the risk of injury. Critical factors in a landscape where mobility often meant survival. Head and hand coverings were equally important. Frostbite on fingers, toes, ears, or the nose could be debilitating or fatal. Fur caps, hoods, and mittens allowed humans to maintain dexterity while enduring extreme cold. The design of these items reflected careful attention to anatomy and function. Even small details like overlapping seams or fur orientation could significantly impact warmth and protection. Each layer was meticulously thought out, balancing insulation, flexibility, and accessibility, a testament to the sophisticated problem-solving skills of Ice Age humans. The psychological impact of clothing was profound. Wearing protective garments not only shielded the body but also bolstered confidence and reduced fear in the face of a hostile environment. Knowing one was insulated against the cold allowed early humans to focus on hunting, gathering, and building shelters without the constant distraction of physical suffering. Clothing became a symbol of empowerment, a tangible way to exert control of the environment, and a mental buffer against the relentless pressures of the Ice Age. Clothing also influenced mobility and strategy. Hunters could move more stealthily, soldiers or scouts could travel longer distances, and families could explore and forage in areas previously inaccessible due to cold. By insulating the body and preserving energy, well-crafted garments extended the effective range of human activity and increased the chances of successful resource acquisition. This practical advantage underscores the intimate connection between clothing, survival, and human innovation. Maintenance was another crucial aspect. Hides and furs required care to remain effective. Drying, cleaning, patching, and sometimes retanning were part of daily routines. Knowledge of these techniques was passed down through generations, ensuring that critical protective gear remained functional and reliable. In this way, clothing was not only a product but also a practice, a continuous process of creation, adaptation, and refinement. Ultimately, the story of Ice Age clothing is a story of ingenuity, observation, and adaptation. Humans transformed the raw materials of the environment into highly effective survival tools, balancing protection, mobility, and durability. The contrast between exposed, vulnerable bodies and those wrapped in carefully constructed garments emphasized the essential role of clothing in life and death during the Ice Age. Through fur, hide, and sinew, early humans turned the coldest, most hostile conditions into a landscape that could be endured, navigated, and ultimately mastered. Clothing was more than warmth. It was survival, culture, and identity intertwined. It demonstrated the capacity of humans to observe, innovate, and adapt, laying the groundwork for future technological and cultural advancements. The Ice Age may have tested the limits of human endurance, but through the careful crafting and strategic use of clothing, humans learned to endure, thrive, and leave a mark upon a frozen world that demanded resilience, intelligence, and ingenuity. In the frozen wilderness of the Ice Age, survival was never a solitary endeavor. Life depended on the tribe, the family unit, and the intricate bonds that connected each member to the whole. Humans learned early that cooperation, shared knowledge, and emotional support were as crucial as fire, tools, or clothing. The biting cold and relentless hunger could strip away strength and hope, but social bonds provided resilience, strategy, and even joy in an otherwise harsh world. Understanding family and social life reveals not only how humans endured the Ice Age, but also how the foundations of human society were forged under extreme conditions. Tribal life was organized around cooperation and division of labor. Adults, children, and elders each had roles that reflected both necessity and survival strategy. Hunters tracked and killed large game, often coordinating in sophisticated strategies to trap or ambush prey. Gatherers searched for edible plants, roots, and small animals, often in areas inaccessible to larger hunters. Elders, with years of experience, passed down critical knowledge about the land, seasonal rhythms, and predator behavior. Even the youngest children contributed, learning observation skills, assisting in small tasks, and absorbing lessons essential for future survival. This division of labor optimized efficiency, minimized risk, and reinforced the importance of each member to the collective well-being of the tribe. Family units were tightly knit, often centered around multi-generational groups living and traveling together. Proximity in sleeping arrangements, shared fire, and collaborative food preparation strengthened bonds. Physical closeness not only provided warmth, but also nurtured trust, emotional resilience, and psychological security. In the freezing nights, the heat of bodies pressed together under layers of furs was a literal and symbolic safeguard against the icy threats outside. The contrast between vulnerability to the cold and protection offered by family highlights the dual function of social bonds as both practical survival tools and emotional lifelines. Communication was central to social cohesion. Words, gestures, and even early forms of symbolic language allowed the tribe to coordinate hunts, warn predators, share knowledge about edible plants, and transmit rituals. Storytelling played a crucial role, particularly around the fire. Tales of past hunts, predator encounters, and seasonal migrations were not mere entertainment. They were practical lessons embedded with strategy, cultural norms, and moral guidance. Through stories, knowledge survived across generations, preserving collective wisdom of the tribe and ensuring that mistakes were rarely repeated. Rituals and shared activities further reinforce unity. Ceremonies marking successful hunts, seasonal changes, or the birth of children provided structure, emotional stability, and a sense of continuity. Music, chanting, and dance may have accompanied these rituals, helping to bond the tribe and create a rhythm to daily life. Even simple routines, such as maintaining fire, preparing meals, or repairing clothing, were communal acts that strengthened interdependence. In a landscape defined by scarcity and danger, these practices foster resilience, trust, and cooperation. Conflict, however, was inevitable. Competition for limited resources, disputes over hunting territories, and the stress of survival could spark tension within the tribe. Yet social rules, hierarchies, and cultural norms often mitigated violence. Leadership emerged based on skill, experience, and wisdom, particularly in hunting, conflict resolution, and strategic decision-making. Decisions about who hunted, who gathered, and how to distribute food were carefully considered, balancing fairness, necessity, and survival. In this way, social structure was not arbitrary. It was an adaptive mechanism designed to maximize the tribe's chance of survival in a harsh and unforgiving world. Care for the young and the elderly was particularly crucial. Children represented the future, and their education and survival skills, from tool use to predator awareness, was a matter of life and death. Elders contributed invaluable experience, knowledge of migration routes, and guidance on seasonal resources. Protecting these vulnerable members ensured the continuation of the tribe's knowledge and survival strategies. The contrast between vulnerability and protection underscores the sophisticated balance early humans struck between immediate survival and long-term continuity. Emotional bonds were also central to resilience. Fear, stress, and grief were constants in the Ice Age, but companionship and support provided psychological buffers. Sharing warmth, food, and stories around the fire alleviated anxiety and fostered hope. Celebrating successes, mourning losses, and simply existing together allowed humans to endure prolonged winters, scarcity, and danger. Social bonds were in many ways as vital as any tool or garment, creating an invisible shield against the pressures of the environment. Hunting and gathering expeditions themselves reinforced social cohesion. Groups had to coordinate, plan routes, and communicate effectively. Shared danger in tracking large game or navigating icy terrain forged trust and solidarity. Victories and failures alike strengthened connections, teaching the tribe to rely on one another and reinforcing the importance of collective effort. The contrast between the perils of the journey and the safety of returning to the communal fire illustrates the dynamic interplay of risk, skill, and cooperation in Ice Age social life. Even leisure and play had a role. Children engaged in mock hunts, skill games, and simple competitions that train coordination, strategy, and observation while providing emotional relief. These activities were subtle but powerful ways of transmitting survival knowledge while reinforcing social bonds. Play allowed the next generation to learn, experiment, and build confidence, preparing them to contribute meaningfully to the tribe's survival in adulthood. Ultimately, family and social life in the Ice Age was a backbone of human resilience. It transformed harsh, lonely environments into structured, cooperative, and emotionally sustaining communities. Through communication, shared labor, rituals, and emotional support, humans created a network that amplified survival skills, knowledge retention, and psychological stability. The contrast between the dangers of the frozen world outside and the warmth, safety, and cooperation inside the tribe highlights the profound importance of social bonds in human evolution. In the end, the Ice Age teaches us that survival was never solely a matter of individual strength or intelligence. It was a product of connection, cooperation, and the intricate web of relationships that allowed humans to endure, adapt, and ultimately thrive. The bonds forged around the fire, in the hunt, and within the shelter were as crucial as any tool or weapon, a testament to the enduring power of family and social life in the face of nature's harshest challenges. In the endless cold and darkness of the Ice Age, survival was not just a physical struggle. It was a psychological and spiritual one. Early humans faced forces they could not control: frozen landscapes, fierce predators, and unpredictable weather. In response, they developed rituals and belief systems to navigate the unknown, to create meaning in a world dominated by danger, scarcity, and uncertainty. These early spiritual practices were deeply intertwined with survival, providing guidance, comfort, and cohesion in a world that offered no guarantees. Understanding rituals and beliefs offers a glimpse into the cognitive and cultural evolution of humans, revealing how they confronted both the seen and unseen challenges of their environment. Rituals often revolve around survival milestones. A successful hunt, for instance, was rarely viewed as purely practical. It was an event worthy of ceremony and reverence. Hunters might perform dances, chants, or symbolic gestures to honor the spirits of the animals they had taken, acknowledging the life sacrificed to sustain the tribe. These practices served multiple purposes. They reinforced ethical hunting practices, reminded the community of the interconnectedness of life, and strengthened social bonds by creating shared experiences of gratitude and reflection. In this way, rituals provided both spiritual and practical reinforcement for survival behavior. Belief in supernatural forces or spirits likely helped explain natural phenomena that early humans could not otherwise understand. Thunderstorms, avalanches, disease, or sudden shifts in animal migration could all be frightening and inexplicable. By attributing these events to unseen powers, humans could develop strategies to appease or influence them through offerings, dances, or other ceremonial acts. This belief system provided a psychological framework that reduced fear and uncertainty, allowing humans to act decisively in dangerous situations. The contrast between the chaotic forces of nature and the structured, symbolic responses of ritual highlights the adaptive function of early spirituality. Rituals were often tied to the cycles of the seasons, particularly the harsh winter months. The longest nights and coldest days represented a time of both peril and reflection. Humans may have marked the winter solstice with ceremonies honoring the return of the sun, recognizing the importance of seasonal change for survival. Such rituals reinforced awareness of environmental rhythms, communicated survival knowledge, and provided hope during the darkest periods. In this sense, rituals served both practical and symbolic purposes, linking the physical challenges of winter with a cultural and emotional framework for endurance. Art and symbolism were integral to these beliefs. Cave paintings, carvings, and etched symbols often depicted animals, hunting scenes, and abstract patterns, suggesting connections to spiritual or ritualistic practices. These visual expressions may have served as teaching tools, communal memory aids, or ways to invoke protection and success. The act of creating art itself was a ritual, fostering concentration, focus, and communal participation. The contrast between the permanence of stone and the ephemeral nature of life and survival highlights the human desire to leave a mark, to impose meaning on a transient existence. Shamanic or ritual leaders may have emerged within tribes, individuals recognized for their wisdom, courage, or knowledge of natural and supernatural forces. These figures could guide ceremonies, advise on hunting strategies, interpret omens, or mediate disputes. Their role combined practical guidance with spiritual authority, bridging the material and symbolic worlds. Leadership of this type reinforced social cohesion, transmitted knowledge across generations, and provided a framework for understanding and interacting with the environment in ways that purely practical knowledge could not achieve. The preparation and use of ritual objects also played a crucial role. Stones, bones, feathers, and other natural materials were sometimes modified or arranged to create talismans, amulets, or ceremonial spaces. These objects were believed to carry protective power, influence outcomes, or honor deities and spirits. The care taken in selecting and crafting such items underscores the cognitive sophistication of early humans, their capacity for abstract thought, and their ability to imbue physical objects with symbolic meaning. These practices strengthened group identity and provided a tangible link between humans and the forces they sought to understand or influence. Rituals also helped humans cope with loss, danger, and the unpredictability of life. When a predator struck, a hunt failed, or a winter storm destroyed supplies, ceremonies allowed the tribe to process fear and grief collectively. Mourning practices, symbolic acts of protection, or offerings to spirits provided emotional outlets and psychological resilience. This capacity to ritualize experience reflects an early understanding of human psychology and the importance of emotional regulation for long-term survival. In a harsh environment, maintaining morale was as crucial as securing food or warmth. Moreover, rituals reinforce learning and memory. By embedding survival knowledge within symbolic acts, songs, and stories, humans ensure that essential strategies, hunting patterns, seasonal awareness, and predator behavior were passed down across generations. Knowledge transmitted through ritual was more likely to be remembered and respected, linking cultural continuity to survival. The contrast between the impermanence of daily experience and the structured, enduring nature of ritual highlights the role of belief systems in shaping the trajectory of human civilization. Ultimately, the rituals and beliefs of Ice Age humans were an essential tool for navigating uncertainty. They bridged the material and spiritual worlds, combining survival strategies with psychological resilience, ethical guidance, and social cohesion. Through ritual, humans created a framework that allowed them to confront the unknown with courage, cooperation, and a sense of purpose. The interplay between fear and hope, danger and protection, chaos and structure illustrates the profound adaptive value of early spiritual practices. In the end, rituals and beliefs were as vital to survival as fire, clothing, or hunting skills. They provided meaning in the face of adversity, shaped social structures, reinforced learning, and offered psychological stability in a world defined by extremes. The Ice Age was not only a physical challenge, but a cultural crucible, forging human intelligence, creativity, and spirituality. Through these practices, humans found ways to endure, interpret, and ultimately thrive in a landscape of darkness, cold, and uncertainty. The Ice Age was a world teeming with life, yet it was a life defined by extremes. Animals were not merely obstacles or sources of food. They were both allies and adversaries, shaping human survival strategies, culture, and even spiritual beliefs. From massive mammoths to nimble rabbits, every creature played a role in the ecosystem and, by extension, in the daily existence of early humans. Understanding the relationship between humans and the animal kingdom reveals how survival was not just a matter of skill, but also of observation, adaptation, and respect for the natural world. Large herbivores were vital to survival. Mammoths, bison, reindeer, and horses provided meat, hides, bones, and sinew, resources essential for food, clothing, tools, and shelter. Hunting these animals demanded strategy, cooperation, and courage. Humans tracked migratory patterns, studied herd behavior, and coordinated drives or ambushes to bring down prey. The contrast between the immense strength of these animals and the relatively fragile humans underscores the ingenuity required to survive. The successful hunt brought sustenance and materials, but failure could mean starvation or injury, highlighting the delicate balance of risk and reward. Predators, on the other hand, were constant threats that forced humans to develop vigilance, tactics, and defensive strategies. Wolves, saber-toothed cats, cave lions, and bears were formidable opponents, often as intelligent and adaptive as humans themselves. Avoidance, group defense, and fire became essential tools for survival. Studying predator behavior allowed humans to anticipate attacks, adjust hunting strategies, and protect vulnerable members of the tribe. The tension between hunting for survival and defending against predators created a dynamic, high-stakes environment where observation and intelligence were as crucial as physical strength. Animals also influenced migration patterns. Humans often followed the movements of herbivore herds, tracking them to ensure access to food and raw materials. Seasonal migrations dictated where tribes would establish temporary camps or return to more permanent shelters. Rivers, plains, and forests were not just landscapes. They were networks of life, mapped through the movement of animals. The ability to interpret these patterns, to understand which creatures were present, and when, became a form of intelligence critical for survival. Humans learned to read the subtle signs of nature: tracks in the snow, broken branches, droppings, and feeding traces. Each observation could mean the difference between a successful hunt or a wasted day in the freezing cold. Smaller animals also played vital roles. Rabbits, birds, fish, and insects supplemented the diet when larger prey was scarce. These creatures required different skills: traps, snares, fishing techniques, and knowledge of seasonal availability. While they provided less food individually, collectively they could sustain a tribe through lean periods. The contrast between large, high-risk hunts and smaller, reliable sources of nutrition highlights the diversity of survival strategies employed by Ice Age humans. Flexibility and resourcefulness were as important as strength or courage. The natural environment, intertwined with the animal kingdom, demanded constant adaptation. Forests, tundras, rivers, and frozen plains each presented unique challenges. Humans learned to exploit natural shelters, understand behavior of prey and predators in different terrains, and utilize plants for food, medicine, and tool-making. Weather patterns and seasonal changes dictated movement, clothing, and fire use. The interconnectedness of humans, animals, and nature created a delicate balance, a web of life where every decision had consequences, and every observation could be a matter of life or death. Humans also formed symbolic and spiritual relationships with animals. Cave paintings often depicted animals with striking accuracy and artistic emphasis, suggesting reverence, fascination, or ritual significance. Some animals may have been seen as totems or spiritual guides, embodying traits humans wish to emulate: strength, speed, cunning, or resilience. Rituals involving animals reinforced hunting ethics, ensured respect for life, and connected humans to the unseen forces of nature. The contrast between the practical use of animals for survival and their symbolic meaning reflects the cognitive complexity of early humans and their ability to weave functionality with spirituality. Interactions with animals extended beyond hunting and defense. Observing behaviors provided critical lessons in survival. Watching predators coordinate hunts informed human tactics for group hunting. Understanding herd movements helped anticipate seasonal abundance or scarcity. Even the behavior of birds, insects, and smaller mammals could signal changes in weather or food availability. Humans were keen students of the natural world, learning patterns, rhythms, and strategies from the creatures around them. Their survival depended as much on observation and adaptation as on physical prowess or technology. Some animals, like dogs, were likely domesticated or at least tolerated in close proximity. These early relationships may have enhanced hunting success, provided protection, or strengthened social bonds. The presence of cooperative animals introduced a new dynamic to survival, highlighting the emerging understanding of relationships and mutual benefit between species. This early partnership foreshadowed the more extensive human-animal relationships that would develop in later millennia. The contrast between the abundance and scarcity of animals shaped psychological resilience as well. Feasts following successful hunts brought celebration, communal bonding, and a sense of security. Lean periods, marked by failed hunts or migrating herds, intensified fear, stress, and the struggle for survival. Humans had to maintain hope, patience, and resourcefulness, relying on both knowledge and intuition. The interplay between plentiful and scarce times underscored the fragility of life and the ingenuity required to endure the Ice Age. Ultimately, animals and nature were inseparable from the human experience. They were sources of sustenance, danger, and inspiration. The Ice Age demanded a profound understanding of the environment, the creatures within it, and the rhythms that govern life. Humans learned to observe, anticipate, adapt, and respect, forging strategies that combine practical survival with cognitive and cultural sophistication. The contrast between the harsh, untamed wilderness and the human capacity for observation, adaptation, and symbolic thought highlights the profound intelligence and resilience that allowed humans to thrive where many other species could not. Through these relationships, early humans were not merely surviving. They were mastering the environment, learning lessons that would guide generations, and building the foundations of ecological understanding, social cooperation, and spiritual reflection. Animals were both adversaries and teachers, threats and allies, shaping the trajectory of human evolution in ways that were as practical as they were profound. In the frozen landscapes of the Ice Age, the dance between humans and the natural world defined existence, survival, and the early human story itself. Survival in the Ice Age often demanded movement. The frozen landscape was unpredictable. Herds of prey shifted, weather patterns changed abruptly, and resources could vanish almost overnight. Humans were forced to become perpetual travelers, guided by instinct, experience, and careful observation of the environment. Migration was not merely a response to scarcity. It was a strategy, a way to anticipate the rhythms of nature, avoid dangers, and maximize opportunities for sustenance. Understanding these journeys provides insight into the courage, intelligence, and resilience required to survive in a world where staying in one place could mean death. The first necessity of migration was knowledge of the terrain. Early humans tracked herds of herbivores across vast plains, following seasonal patterns to ensure access to food and materials. Rivers, mountains, and ice fields were both obstacles and navigational guides. Recognizing landmarks, understanding the behavior of prey, and interpreting environmental signs such as animal tracks or wind patterns were essential skills. These journeys required planning, foresight, and constant vigilance, as a single misstep could lead to exhaustion, separation, or exposure to predators. The contrast between the safety of established shelters and the vulnerability of the open tundra highlights the high stakes of these migrations. Journeys were often communal undertakings. Small groups or entire tribes traveled together, sharing knowledge, duties, and responsibilities. Hunters scouted ahead. Gatherers searched for edible plants and water, and elders offered guidance based on memory and experience. Children learned by observing and participating, gradually internalizing navigation techniques, survival skills, and environmental awareness. This collaborative approach increased efficiency, reduced risk, and strengthened social bonds, demonstrating that movement was as much a social endeavor as a practical one. The timing of migration was critical. Seasonal changes dictated when herds would move, when rivers would freeze, and when shelter options became viable. Humans had to anticipate these changes, preparing clothing, tools, and food caches in advance. Failing to move at the right time could result in starvation, hypothermia, or separation from the group. This required careful observation of the environment, understanding subtle signs, and applying learned knowledge across generations. The contrast between those who adapted to these rhythms and those who did not illustrates the delicate balance between survival and extinction. Ice Age humans were also forced to contend with conflicts during migration. Territories overlapped, and competition for resources sometimes led to confrontations with rival groups. These conflicts were rarely arbitrary. They were about survival, access to food, water, and shelter, and protection of kin. Weapons, strategy, and group coordination became essential, not just for hunting but for defense. The capacity to negotiate, assert dominance, or retreat strategically often determined which groups thrived and which perished. These encounters shaped social structure, resource management, and the evolution of cooperative strategies in human communities. Long journeys required careful attention to logistics. Food had to be portable or preserved, dried meat, stored roots, and cache supplies became crucial. Tools and clothing needed to be maintained, repaired, and sometimes crafted on the move. Shelter options varied: temporary lean-tos, cave along migratory paths, or snow shelters provided brief respite. Every aspect of life had to be adapted for mobility, illustrating the ingenuity and flexibility of early humans. The contrast between settled living and constant movement highlights the extreme demands of life during the Ice Age. Migration also created opportunities for cultural exchange. Groups encountered one another, sharing knowledge, techniques, and perhaps even forming alliances. Trade of tools, materials, or symbolic objects may have facilitated social bonds and mutual survival strategies. These interactions allowed for the diffusion of innovations, from hunting strategies to fire-making techniques, enhancing the survival prospects of multiple communities. In this way, movement across landscapes was not just a physical necessity, but a driver of cultural evolution. Environmental hazards on the journey were omnipresent. Frozen rivers, crevasses, snowstorms, and thin ice posed lethal threats. Humans needed keen observation, experience, and teamwork to navigate safely. They used natural landmarks, celestial cues, and animal behavior to guide their routes. Mistakes could lead to injury, death, or the loss of critical resources. The interplay between risk and strategy demonstrates the acute awareness and adaptability required to move through such a hostile environment. Beyond mere survival, these journeys fostered innovation. Tools were adapted for portability. Hunting strategies became more sophisticated, and social organization evolved to coordinate movement effectively. Humans learned to read landscapes, anticipate animal behavior, and construct temporary shelters quickly. Each migration was a lesson, a refining of skills that would enhance future survival. The contrast between the dangers of the journey and the rewards of reaching fertile hunting grounds underscores the delicate dance between risk and reward in the Ice Age. Psychologically, migration tested endurance, resilience, and cooperation. Continuous travel exposed humans to fatigue, cold, and uncertainty. Maintaining morale, trust, and coordination was essential. Rituals, songs, and shared stories may have helped sustain group cohesion, offering a sense of continuity and purpose during physically and emotionally demanding journeys. The contrast between the harsh external conditions and the internal cohesion of the group illustrates the critical role of social bonds in survival. Ultimately, migration, journeys, and conflicts during the Ice Age were not random but strategic responses to an unforgiving environment. Humans observed, planned, and adapted, using mobility as a tool to access resources, avoid danger, and maintain social cohesion. Conflicts were managed with strategy and negotiation. Knowledge was shared, and skills refined with each journey. These movements shaped the physical and cultural evolution of humans, demonstrating the interplay between environment, adaptation, and social organization. The story of migration during the Ice Age is a testament to human resilience, intelligence, and ingenuity. It highlights the capacity to plan, cooperate, and adapt in the face of extreme adversity. Every journey was a delicate balance between risk and reward, danger and opportunity, death and survival. Through movement, humans mastered not only the landscape, but the complexities of social organization, resource management, and environmental adaptation. In the vast, frozen world, the courage and wisdom of Ice Age humans allowed them to endure, explore, and ultimately thrive, leaving a legacy that would shape the course of human history. Food was the lifeblood of Ice Age survival, yet acquiring it was never simple. The frozen landscapes offered little in the way of predictable resources, and humans had to be relentless observers, strategists, and improvisers to secure sustenance. Hunting large game, gathering plants, and preserving food for lean periods required skill, cooperation, and knowledge passed down through generations. Each meal represented not only physical nourishment, but also a triumph over an unforgiving environment. Understanding the strategies early humans used to feed themselves provides a window into their intelligence, resilience, and adaptability. Large game hunting was central to survival. Mammoths, bison, reindeer, and horses provided not just meat, but also hides for clothing, bones for tools, and sinew for cordage. Hunting these formidable animals demanded coordination, patience, and ingenuity. Humans often employed strategic ambushes, herding techniques, or traps designed to exploit the landscape. For example, groups might drive animals toward cliffs, deep snowdrifts, or narrow valleys, using terrain to their advantage. The hunt required careful planning, timing, and communication, illustrating that survival depended as much on intelligence and strategy as on strength or weaponry. Weapons played a crucial role. Spears, throwing sticks, and atlatls extended range and increased efficiency, while stone-tipped arrows allowed hunters to take down prey from a safer distance. Tools were maintained meticulously. A broken spearhead could mean failure or injury. Knowledge of materials, angles, and animal anatomy was essential for effectiveness. These weapons were not static. They evolved in design and function, reflecting a continuous process of learning, experimentation, and adaptation to changing prey and environmental conditions. The contrast between raw physical power and carefully honed technology underscores the ingenuity required for survival. Small game and plant gathering complemented large hunts. Rabbits, birds, fish, and edible roots were critical, especially during harsh winters when large prey was scarce. Humans used traps, snares, nets, and fishing techniques that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of animal behavior. They also identified edible and medicinal plants, distinguishing between those that nourished and those that could poison. This knowledge, learned through observation, experimentation, oral transmission, ensured that tribes could survive even when hunting was unsuccessful. Flexibility and adaptability in diet were key to enduring the extreme conditions of the Ice Age. Preservation and storage were equally critical. Meat was dried, smoked, or frozen to extend its shelf life, while plant foods were cached in cool, protected locations. Storage strategies allowed humans to survive periods of scarcity, ensuring a continuous supply of nutrition even during extended winters. Fire was often used in these preservation processes, not only to cook food, but also prevent spoilage and maintain warmth in storage areas. These methods reflect the integration of practical survival skills, environmental awareness, and technological innovation. Food acquisition also shaped social dynamics. Hunting required teamwork, communication, and trust, while the distribution of resources reinforced social hierarchy and cooperation. Successful hunters were respected, but sharing food ensured the survival of the entire group. Rituals or symbolic acts often accompanied hunting and food preparation, emphasizing gratitude and ethical treatment of prey. These cultural practices helped maintain cohesion and moral order, linking sustenance to both survival and social stability. The contrast between the dangers of hunting and the security of communal sharing highlights the interplay of risk, reward, and social intelligence. Ice Age humans also adapted their strategies to seasonal changes. In winter, reliance on stored food increased, while hunting trips became riskier due to cold, snow, and scarcity of prey. During milder months, humans focused on gathering abundant plant foods, fishing, and planning for future scarcity. Understanding the cycles of nature, animal migration patterns, and plant availability was crucial for survival. These strategies reflect a dynamic relationship with the environment, demonstrating not only practical intelligence, but also foresight and planning. Hunting methods varied based on terrain and prey. In open plains, coordinated drives allowed groups to manage large herds, while in forests or rocky areas, ambushes and stealth were more effective. Ice Age humans observed their prey meticulously, learning habits, migration routes, and vulnerability points. They experimented with tactics, shared knowledge across the tribe, and refined techniques over generations. This adaptive approach ensured that humans could exploit a wide variety of ecological niches, turning a challenging environment into a resource-rich landscape. The nutritional value of food was also understood intuitively. Fat-rich meat was prioritized during winter for its energy density, while leaner meats and plants provided essential vitamins and minerals. Humans balanced immediate energy needs with long-term survival, ensuring they remain healthy and capable of enduring harsh conditions. The contrast between energy-rich winter diets and more varied seasonal diets illustrates the sophisticated understanding early humans had of nutrition and its direct impact on survival. Psychologically, food acquisition shaped resilience and motivation. Hunting success brought not only sustenance but also confidence, morale, and social prestige. Failure, in contrast, induced stress, fear, and urgency. Rituals, preparation, and planning helped manage these emotional fluctuations, creating a sense of control in an unpredictable world. The interplay between the physical act of hunting and the psychological reinforcement of successful food strategies underscores the holistic nature of Ice Age survival. Fire, tools, and teamwork combined to create a highly efficient food procurement system. Fire allowed cooking and preservation. Tools enhanced hunting and gathering efficiency, and social coordination ensured the safety and distribution of resources. Early humans were not merely reacting to their environment. They were actively shaping it, using intelligence, observation, and cooperation to secure life in a frozen wilderness. The contrast between the deadly cold outside and the warmth and sustenance provided by a successful hunt and prepared food highlights the importance of these combined strategies. Ultimately, food and hunting in the Ice Age were not merely survival activities. They were central to social structure, cultural expression, and cognitive development. The strategies humans employed reveal a profound understanding of the natural world, an ability to innovate and adapt, and a sophisticated integration of social, technological, and environmental knowledge. The delicate balance of risk, skill, and reward defined daily life, and the success of these strategies ensured not only survival, but the flourishing of human intelligence and culture. In the frozen expanse of the Ice Age, food was more than sustenance. It was a measure of ingenuity, resilience, and foresight. Through hunting, gathering, preservation, and sharing, early humans transformed scarcity into abundance, danger into strategy, and survival into culture. Every meal was a testament to the intelligence, cooperation, and adaptability that would define humanity for millennia to come. In the icy wilderness of the Ice Age, survival depended not only on food, clothing, and shelter, but also on rest. Sleep was a precious commodity, yet it was fraught with danger. Harsh winds, freezing temperatures, predatory threats, and the need for vigilance made it a delicate balance between rest and alertness. Early humans learned that proper sleep was not a luxury. It was a survival tool, essential for physical recovery, mental acuity, and the continuation of the tribe. Understanding how they rested in the cold provides insight into their ingenuity, resilience, and the strategies that allowed them to endure one of the harshest environments in human history. Shelter was a foundation of winter survival and sleep. Caves offered natural protection against wind and predators, and were often lined with layers of animal hides, moss, and grasses to insulate against the cold. For groups without access to caves, temporary shelters were constructed using branches, snow, or ice, sometimes forming semi-subterranean huts. These structures were designed to retain heat, block wind, and provide a safe, enclosed space for rest. Even small innovations like windbreaks or bedding arrangements could mean the difference between warmth and hypothermia. The contrast between the hostile, frozen environment outside and the relative security of a well-prepared shelter highlights the critical role of architecture in survival. Bedding and insulation were essential. Thick layers of furs, leaves, and moss provided cushioning and trapped body heat, creating a microclimate within the sleeping area. Humans understood that insulation at night could conserve energy and prevent heat loss, vital for survival in sub-zero temperatures. Sleep arrangements often reflected social structure and survival priorities. Children were kept close to elders or parents for warmth, while hunters or scouts might sleep near exits to act as sentinels. This careful attention to placement, insulation, and communal warmth illustrates an early understanding of thermal management and safety in design. Fire was indispensable for sleep in winter. Not only did it provide warmth and light, but also offer protection against predators. Early humans mastered techniques to maintain fire overnight, ensuring embers remained hot enough to reignite flames in the morning. Fire also served as a psychological anchor, reducing fear and providing comfort during the long, dark nights. The crackle of flames, the smell of burning wood or fat, and the soft glow illuminated the interior shelters, creating an environment where humans could rest, recover, and prepare for the challenges of the coming day. The interplay between warmth, light, and safety underscores the multifaceted role of fire in survival and psychological well-being. Sleep schedules were likely adapted to environmental conditions. During the long nights of winter, humans may have slept in extended stretches to conserve energy, punctuated by periods of alertness for warmth, predator vigilance, or tending the fire. Conversely, short days require maximization of daylight for hunting, gathering, and travel, affecting sleep patterns accordingly. This dynamic approach demonstrates a flexible, responsive understanding of the balance between rest and survival, highlighting cognitive and behavioral adaptation to extreme seasonal conditions. Group sleeping arrangements reinforce social bonds and security. Close proximity allowed body heat to be shared, reducing overall energy expenditure and providing physical comfort. Being together also meant increased vigilance. While some rested, others monitored the surroundings, ensuring collective safety. This cooperative approach reflects the dual nature of sleep in the Ice Age, both a private necessity for individual health and a communal activity essential for group survival. The contrast between vulnerability during sleep and protection through social cooperation illustrates the intertwined nature of biology and social behavior. Psychological aspects of sleep were equally important. Long, cold nights could evoke fear, anxiety, and stress. Rituals, storytelling, or songs around the fire before sleep provided reassurance, reinforced social cohesion, and mentally prepared individuals for rest. These practices likely reduced anxiety, improved sleep quality, and contributed to overall resilience. Sleep was therefore not just a physiological process. It was an integrated experience involving comfort, safety, social interaction, and mental preparation. Even the timing of sleep reflected practical considerations. Humans had to balance the need for rest with the necessity of tending to the fire, monitoring the environment, or preparing food. Those responsible for keeping watch would alternate shifts, a practice that required coordination, communication, and trust. By managing sleep strategically, tribes ensured that essential functions continued uninterrupted through the night, maximizing survival chances while conserving energy. This strategy highlights the complex interplay between individual needs and group priorities in Ice Age life. Adaptations to extreme cold were evident in clothing and bedding used during sleep. Layers of furs, often combined with plant materials for additional insulation, were arranged to cover exposed skin, with particular attention to extremities like feet, hands, and the face. Insulated head coverings prevented heat loss, while sleeping on elevated surfaces or insulated platforms kept humans away from frozen ground. These techniques demonstrate an advanced understanding of heat retention, thermodynamics, and human physiology, reflecting the cumulative knowledge gained through trial, observation, and cultural transmission. Finally, sleep was essential for maintaining strength, focus, and survival skills. A well-rested hunter could track prey more effectively, respond predators, and perform complex tasks such as tool-making or fire management. Sleep was recovery, strategy, and preparation rolled into one. Without adequate rest, humans risked injury, poor judgment, and reduced survival prospects. The contrast between the restorative power of sleep within the safety of the shelter and the dangers of sleep without protection highlights the delicate balance early humans had to maintain to endure winter's extremes. In the end, sleep in the Ice Age was far more than a daily necessity. It was a sophisticated survival strategy, integrating shelter, fire, clothing, social cooperation, and psychological resilience. Through careful management of rest, humans conserved energy, strengthened bonds, maintained vigilance, and prepared for the relentless challenges of life in frozen landscapes. The ability to sleep safely and effectively was as vital as hunting, gathering, or tool-making, a testament to the intelligence, adaptability, and foresight that allowed humans to thrive in one of the harshest environments ever faced by our species. Fire, tools, and shelters were the pillars of Ice Age survival, shaping the very fabric of daily life. In a world dominated by freezing temperatures, predators, and unpredictable weather, humans needed strategies that went beyond instinct. They needed mastery over their environment. These innovations were not just conveniences. They were essential for survival. Fire provided warmth, protection, and cooking. Tools enabled hunting, processing, and construction, and shelters offered safety from both elements and predators. Together, they formed an interconnected system that allowed humans to endure and thrive in conditions that would have otherwise been fatal. Fire was arguably the most critical element of survival. Beyond warmth, it provided light during long, dark winters, extending hours for activity and communication. It allowed cooking, which made food more digestible and safer by killing parasites and bacteria. Fire also served as a deterrent for predators, creating a protective perimeter around the tribe. Early humans mastered techniques of maintaining, transporting, and igniting fire, using flint, pyrite, and natural tinder to ensure that this life-sustaining element was always available. The glow of fire in a cave or temporary shelter was more than physical illumination. It was a symbol of security, community, and resilience in a hostile world. Tools were equally transformative. Stone, bow, and antler, and wood were fashioned into an array of implements designed for specific tasks. Sharp stone blades allowed for butchering meat efficiently, while bone needles enabled sewing of hides for clothing. Spears, atlatls, and other hunting tools increased range and lethality, turning the odds in favor of humans against large, dangerous prey. Tools were maintained meticulously. Edges were sharpened, handles repaired, and materials reused. The creation and use of these tools illustrate not only practical ingenuity, but also abstract thinking, planning, and foresight, hallmarks of human intelligence that would define our evolutionary trajectory. Shelters provided refuge from the extremes of the Ice Age. Caves were preferred when available, offering natural insulation, protection from predators, and strategic vantage points. When caves were inaccessible, humans constructed temporary shelters using wood, bone, hides, and snow. Semi-subterranean structures, insulated with layers of fur and plant material, offered warmth and reduced exposure to icy winds. Design considerations included not only heat retention, but also accessibility, defense against predators, and communal organization. The contrast between the barren, frozen landscapes outside and the warmth, safety, and organization inside shelters underscores their importance as both physical and psychological sanctuaries. Fire, tools, and shelters were deeply interconnected. Fire was often central within shelters, providing heat, light, and protection, while tools allowed the construction, maintenance, and optimization of these shelters. Hunting tools ensured a supply of food and raw materials for both clothing and shelter. Each innovation reinforced the others, creating a network of survival strategies that allowed humans to endure long winters, harsh storms, and predator attacks. The synergy between these elements highlights the adaptive sophistication of Ice Age humans. Innovation was driven by necessity. Harsh conditions required constant refinement of tools and techniques. Early humans experimented with stone flaking, hafting, and composite tools, improving efficiency and reducing risk. Fire management evolved from simple hearths to controlled embers, allowing for portable fire starting and cooking. Shelter designs became increasingly sophisticated, integrating ventilation, insulation, and defensive features. Each iteration reflected careful observation, trial and error, and cultural transmission of knowledge, ensuring that improvements were preserved and built upon by successive generations. Fire also played a vital social and psychological role. Beyond warmth and cooking, it became a focal point for communal life. Around the fire, knowledge was shared, stories were told, and rituals were conducted. It provided a sense of continuity, safety, and control in a world often defined by unpredictability. The psychological comfort of fire cannot be underestimated. It reduced fear, fostered cooperation, and allowed humans to plan, innovate, and rest in relative security. The contrast between the dark, cold wilderness outside and the illuminated, warm space around the fire emphasizes its multifaceted importance. Tools extended human capabilities, enabling us to manipulate the environment in ways previously impossible. Hunting, building, clothing, and food preparation all relied on specialized implements. The precision and skill required to craft these tools reveal advanced cognitive abilities, including planning, foresight, and problem-solving. Each tool reflected not only necessity but also creativity and adaptation to specific challenges posed by the environment. The contrast between a naked hand and a carefully crafted spear or knife illustrates the transformative power of technology in the hands of early humans. Shelters were not only functional but also symbolic. Their construction demonstrated human ingenuity, the capacity to plan and organize, and understanding of the interplay between environment and survival needs. Communal sleeping arrangements and shared spaces reinforced social bonds, while the ability to construct and maintain these shelters reflected leadership, skill, and knowledge transmission. In essence, shelters were living testaments to human adaptability, reflecting both practical survival and social organization. Maintenance and innovation were continuous. Fires required tending, tools needed repair, and shelters demanded upkeep to remain effective against the elements. Early humans developed routines and knowledge systems to ensure that these essential components remain functional. This ongoing care demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of cause and effect, resource management, and long-term planning. Critical skills in a landscape where mistakes could be fatal. The integration of fire, tools, and shelters also shaped migration, hunting, and social strategies. Portable fires allowed temporary camps along migratory routes. Tools enabled efficient hunting and construction in diverse environments. Shelters provided resting points and strategic observation posts. Together, these elements extended human range, improved survival odds, and facilitated the expansion of populations into previously inhospitable territories. The contrast between vulnerable humans and mobile, prepared tribes highlights the strategic advantage provided by technological mastery. Ultimately, the mastery of fire, tools, and shelters reflects the essence of human adaptability. These innovations were not isolated. They were part of a dynamic system, interwoven with social structure, cognitive development, and environmental interaction. They allowed humans to convert danger into opportunity, scarcity into resourcefulness, and isolation into community. The Ice Age was not merely a test of strength. It was a crucible of innovation, where humans learned to manipulate their surroundings, master the elements, and ensure survival against overwhelming odds. Through fire, tools, and shelters, early humans transformed the frozen world from a deadly adversary into a manageable, navigable environment. These elements were more than practical. They were symbols of ingenuity, intelligence, and resilience. They illustrate the profound capacity of humans to observe, adapt, and innovate in response to extreme conditions. In the dance between cold, darkness, and survival, fire, tools, and shelters were the anchors that allowed humans not only to endure but to thrive, laying the groundwork for future technological and cultural evolution. As the last embers of the Ice Age glowed and humanity pressed onward into warmer climates, the legacy of survival in the frozen world remained etched into the fabric of human culture, knowledge, and ingenuity. Every tool, firelit shelter, hunt, and ritual represented more than mere survival. It was the accumulation of intelligence, observation, and cooperation that allowed humans to thrive where few other species could endure. The lessons learned during these harsh millennia shaped not only immediate survival, but the trajectory of human evolution, laying the groundwork for social structures, technological innovation, and cultural development that would echo for tens of thousands of years. The challenges of the Ice Age fostered unparalleled adaptability. Humans learned to navigate unpredictable landscapes, track migratory animals, and understand environmental cues that signal danger or opportunity. They mastered fire, crafted sophisticated tools, and constructed shelters capable of withstanding relentless cold. But perhaps more importantly, they cultivated social cohesion and collective problem-solving, understanding that survival was rarely a solo endeavor. Families and tribes learned to cooperate, share knowledge, and organize labor, creating networks of trust and collaboration that would form the foundation of future civilizations. Cultural practices, rituals, and spiritual beliefs emerged as responses to environmental pressures and existential challenges. These practices were far from mere superstition. They reinforced ethical hunting practices, strengthened social bonds, and provided psychological resilience in the face of constant danger. The observation and imitation of animal behavior, the creation of symbolic art, and the establishment of communal rituals reflect a complex cognitive capacity, blending practical survival with abstract thought. In essence, humans were not only surviving, they were interpreting their world, finding meaning, and creating a framework for understanding life and death, risk and reward, darkness and light. Migration, journeys, and conflicts shaped human understanding of geography, resource management, and social dynamics. Ice Age humans were keen observers of seasonal changes, herd movements, and ecological patterns, allowing them to navigate vast territories with precision. Conflict with rival groups, whether over hunting grounds or shelter, demanded diplomacy, strategy, and sometimes combat. These experiences honed negotiation skills, tactical thinking, and social organization. Humans were learning to survive not only against nature, but alongside other humans, understanding the delicate balance between cooperation and competition that would define much of human history. The legacy of hunting and food acquisition is particularly striking. Humans learned to exploit a variety of ecological niches, combining large game hunting with small game trapping, fishing, and plant gathering. Preservation techniques, including drying, smoking, and storage, reflected foresight and planning, while communal sharing reinforced social cohesion. These strategies illustrate the interdependence of environment, technology, and culture. The Ice Age forced humans to become acute students of nutrition, seasonality, and ecological balance, a knowledge base that would inform agricultural development thousands of years later. Fire, tools, and shelters exemplified human ingenuity. Mastery over these elements not only ensured immediate survival, but transformed humans into environmental architects. Fire provided warmth, protection, and the ability to cook and preserve food. Tools extended physical capabilities, enabling efficient hunting, processing, and construction. Shelters provided safety, comfort, and communal spaces for learning, storytelling, and rituals. Together, these innovations created a feedback loop. As technology improved, survival became more feasible, allowing humans to invest time and energy into cultural, social, and cognitive growth. Psychologically, the Ice Age cultivated resilience, foresight, and adaptability. Humans endured fear, scarcity, and extreme environmental pressures, yet they continued to innovate, cooperate, and transmit knowledge. Rituals, storytelling, and communal life provided emotional stability and a sense of purpose, reducing anxiety and reinforcing social bonds. These strategies ensured not only survival, but the cultivation of intelligence, problem-solving skills, and cultural complexity. The contrast between the unforgiving environment and the ingenuity of human adaptation highlights the remarkable capacity of early humans to shape both their physical and social worlds. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of Ice Age survival is the cognitive and cultural foundation created. Humans developed planning, abstract thinking, and symbolic expression, skills that would underpin language, art, and technology for millennia. Communities learned to transmit knowledge, teach survival skills, and maintain cohesion under stress. Observation of nature, predator behavior, and animal migrations honed analytical skills, while innovation in tools, shelters, and fire management demonstrated problem-solving and creativity. The Ice Age was not merely a test of endurance. It was a crucible for human intelligence, culture, and social sophistication. The lessons of the Ice Age extend beyond survival. They reveal the essence of human adaptability. Every challenge faced, from frigid nights to predator encounters, demanded a combination of practical skill, innovation, and social intelligence. Humans learned to anticipate, cooperate, and manipulate their environment in ways that no other species could. These experiences cultivated resilience, curiosity, and ingenuity, the very traits that define humanity today. The frozen world was both a harsh teacher and a crucible for the remarkable trajectory of human evolution. As modern humans reflect on the story of Ice Age survival, we can see the threads of continuity linking past and present. The tools we use, the knowledge we preserve, and the social structures we inhabit all have echoes in the ingenuity of our ancestors. From the mastery of fire and shelter to the formation of communities and cultural practices, the lessons learned during the Ice Age shaped the path of human history. Survival was not only a matter of enduring the elements, it was a process of learning, observing, innovating, and adapting in ways that would resonate for millennia. In the end, the Ice Age was more than a period of extreme cold and darkness. It was a formative epoch that tested the limits of human endurance, intelligence, and social cohesion. Through ingenuity, cooperation, and resilience, humans transformed danger into opportunity, scarcity into resourcefulness, and the challenges of the frozen world into a legacy of survival, knowledge, and culture. The story of Ice Age survival is not merely a chronicle of hardship. It is a testament to the power of adaptation, the courage of early humans, and the indomitable spirit that continues to define our species.